Here we go again. Folks, I truly thought these Nazi types couldn't get any more deceitful than they already were, but as George Carlin said, never underestimate the power of stupid people in large groups. These eugenicist fucks will literally say anything humanly possible just to get their pseudo-scientific narrative across, despite the fact that all of their evidence contradicts what they're saying. I'm gonna give you guys the opportunity to click off the video now, because you might not have enough brain cells left to function properly after you watch the whole thing. In this perpetual facepalm of a video, Sean tries and fails to prove the point that conservative solutions to queer suicides were the way to go in addressing the issue. He lies, omits, prevaricates, interpolates, and fabricates bullshit to fit his narrative so much as a matter of fact to where I could get rich selling the manure to farmers and the grid. Literally everything this man says is a lie, and his audience of 14-year-old children who are so desperate for friend groups that they end up in cults like these all end up soy-facing at the pseudo-intellectual research bro facade this fascist fuck puts on. I really hope this guy just disappears from the internet one day and never comes back, but for now, get ready to experience some deja vu as we use his own data to show him why leftism is the answer.
Alright, so in this video I'm going to argue that discrimination is at best a very partial explanation of why it is that gay people have such higher rates of suicide than do straight people.
Then what other explanation could there be, Sean? It's blatantly obvious that an overwhelming amount of empirical research demonstrates that living in the states with discriminatory laws has pernicious effects on queer health, so is this gonna be another eugenics argument? Of course, who would think otherwise?
And this video is going to focus on the LGB people. It's going to, insofar as I can, use data just on them and not on trans people, because I think that's a pretty distinct group of people, though in a few cases the surveys include trans people as well, but even then they make up only a minority of LGBT people, so it's not that problematic. But anyway, to begin with, it's worth noting that if you think about what constitutes discrimination, a lot of the stuff involved ostracizing someone, insulting them, harming them emotionally or physically, a lot of this is basically just bullying. And because of the similarity, I think that information about bullying is informative when it comes to thinking about discrimination. And to be specific, what I have in mind is that there's a pretty good association between bullying and attempting suicide. One standard deviation increase in bullying predicts a 68% increase in the odds of someone to...
Wonderful, Sean. Right off the bat, you're already proving my point.
But most of that is not because bullying causes suicide. Wrong. We know this because you can look at twin studies, and what they do is they control, in the first place, for genes and the family environment, and in this case also psychopathology that pre-existed being bullied. And when you control for all of those things, now a standard deviation increase in bullying predicts only a 25% increase in the odds of attempting suicide. And so roughly only a third of the sort of just general association between bullying and suicide is even plausibly causal.
Citation needed.
Attempt suicide at a rate that is something like 3 times the rate that heterosexuals do. And given the weak effect that bullying has on suicide, in order for bullying to be the full explanation of the elevated LGBT suicide rate, the average sort of sexual minority person would need to be bullied at a level that fewer than 1 in 100,000 heterosexuals are. And
the fact that you're focusing specifically on bullying, however you may define that, is really an illustration of your deceit. As I've proved, it's not just bullying, but institutional stigmatization in general. You're blatantly ignoring all the facts that contradict you.
And that's obviously insane and not reality.
It is.
In fact, I mean, being discriminated against isn't that common among those gay people who have attempted suicide. So in a meta-analysis of 15 studies, what they found was that the vast majority, 74% of LGBT youth, and youth here means up to the age of 25, who have attempted suicide, that 74% of them answer no when they're asked if they've personally been the victim of various sorts of anti-LGBT discrimination and bullying. And of course, even for that 26% that said that they had been victimized, we shouldn't assume that that victimization caused their suicide attempt.
Erroneous. We've axiomatically proven that queer folk have a significantly reduced risk of suicide in more tolerant countries. Since you're in favor of eugenics, aren't you in favor of breeding blind people out of the population? And that should include you, because you clearly can't see the facts that are right in front of you.
Since, as we've seen, the majority of the association between this kind of victimization and suicide attempts is not actually causal. That
it is.
Does not completely explain these elevated suicide rates is also evidenced by several studies finding that sexual orientation continues to be a risk factor for suicide after self-reported victimization is controlled for. So this study from 1999, for instance, found that homosexuality continues to be a risk factor such that having a kind of sexual minority orientation is associated with more than a doubling in the risk of a recent suicide attempt, even after controlling for both drug use, which you might think would be a reaction to being very discriminated against, and also a direct scale measuring the degree to which...
Yeah, so the conclusion to this study said that for males, sexuality has an independent association with suicide attempts, while for females, suicidality may be mediated by drug use and violence/victimization behaviors. So because there are clearly external factors at play, how does this lead you to a right-wing conclusion?
...to which someone has been the victim of violent discrimination. A 2012 study found, when looking at data on over 2,000 students attending a high school in San Francisco, that LGBT sexual orientation was associated with a 2.6 times elevated risk for suicide, even after controlling for self-reported victimization, race, gender, and drug use. And here, victimization in a...
That's just wrong. The conclusion says, quote, results underscore the deleterious effect of victimization on suicide risk-related outcomes regardless of sexual orientation. As LGBT youth continue to report higher rates of victimization, effective violence prevention approaches must focus on reducing violence among youth, specifically LGBT youth. Additional research should focus on identification of other factors that may help further explain elevated suicide risk among LGBT youth, unquote. So as always, all you have to do to debunk this guy's bullshit is to read the conclusions of the studies, and they'll lead you to a leftist conclusion.
Broader sense, and similarly, a 2016 study found that LGBT status significantly predicted, again, drug use, but more importantly here, suicide risk, even after controlling for self-reported victimization of discrimination.
Yet another lie. I'm surprised this guy is a social scientist, not a lawyer. Anyway, the abstract of the study stated, quote, findings indicate that rural LGBTQ youth are at much higher risk than rural heterosexual youth for suicide risk, bullying, victimization, school violence, drug use, and sexual risk behavior. Risk was particularly high for LGBTQ youth in regard to bullying, victimization, and for suicide risks. Further, bullying, victimization resulting from the perception of LGBTQ status partially mediated drug use, but not suicide risk or school violence. Our results have particular implications for possible interventions targeting LGBTQ youth by high school system personnel in rural Appalachia. Quote, yeah, this asshole just lies through his teeth.
Large sample of American gay youth living in Appalachia. It's also worth noting that the suicide rate of homosexuals is far greater than average, even when only looking at those homosexuals who claim they have not significantly been victimized by discrimination. So for instance, a 2015 study analyzed data on over 8,000 gay Canadian men and asked their participants about experiences of bullying, sexual violence, verbal abuse, physical violence, and discrimination at work. And while experiences of marginalization did correlate with suicidal behavior, the rate of suicidal ideation, or think...
The conclusion of this one states, quote, this investigation suggests that syndemics is a useful theory for studying suicide behavior among gay and bisexual men. Moreover, the findings highlight a need to address gay and bisexual men's health problems holistically, and the urgent need to reduce the population's experience with marginalization and violence, unquote. Yet another lie. They're gonna lock me up in an asylum. Another lie. Another lie, another lie.
Thinking about committing suicide, among those who reported having experienced no discrimination was roughly twice that of heterosexual Canadian men. Similarly, as you can see in this chart here, a 2010 paper found a very high rate of suicide attempt, even among gay adolescents who self-reported having experienced low levels of LGBT-related school victimization. And once again, I should add that the suicide rate of non-bullied LGBT individuals should not be taken to represent what the suicide rate of them would be in general if we got rid of discrimination, because individuals who experience little bullying generally have better health than those who are...
What? What the actual fuck? Complete and total inbred Nazi jibber-jabber aside, the conclusion of the study states, quote, reducing LGBT-related school victimization will likely result in significant long-term health gains and will reduce health disparities for LGBT people. Reducing the dramatic disparities for LGBT youth should be educational and public health priorities, unquote. So no matter the cause of these health detriments, in what way does this lead you to a right-wing conclusion?
Those who are heavily bullied for reasons independent of bullying itself and reasons that pre-exist the bullying. Another irrelevant observation is that it's been noted that looking at self-reported happiness from the General Social Survey, we find that happiness among homosexuals in the United States has declined since the 80s. Over the same time period, we've seen a huge decrease in anti-gay discrimination and a large increase in gay legal rights. But all this progress...
What is this? Why are 3 words of the title in all caps? Why is it so low res? By what metric are you measuring happiness? How would you quantify such a thing? Why the fuck couldn't I find this graph on the General Social Survey's website? Folks, the reason this so-called graph is so absurdly designed is because it's made up. Sean got this from a eugenicist WordPress blog titled Inductivist, with a subtitle saying, "Groups are different, get over it." At the top, for one, even though the author is referencing the General Social Survey's work, he's making the calculation. How could that be possible? Oh, excuse me for a second, there's a foul odor permeating through here somewhere. In plain English, it's made up. It's not on the GSS's website anywhere. It's a crock of horse shit. They made this graph up.
Hasn't done much for the psychological well-being of homosexuals. And we find something similar if we return to suicide rates. So a 2021 paper used survey data from Gallup, and they divided their data into 3 different age cohorts. And what they found was that the rate of lifetime suicide attempt had increased so that it was 21% among gay people born between 1956 and 63. 21% increased to 24% among those born between...
Again, the conclusion of this one states, actually, you know what? Let me bring the free bot back so I can work passively.
These findings indicate the extent to which changes in the social environment have been limited in their impact in stress processes and mental health for sexual minority people. They speak to the endurance of cultural ideologies such as homophobia and heterosexism accompanying rejection of and violence toward sexual minorities. They call our attention to the continued need to recognize threats to the health and well-being of sexual minority people across all ages and remind us that LGBT equality remains elusive.
For a 2020 paper looking at data on almost 100,000 LGBT vets found that the rate of suicide mortality, so this isn't just attempts, this is actual successful, killed yourself stuff, that's been basically constant between 2006 and 2017 after going up and down, kind of oscillating back and forth in the early 2000s.
Yet again, this proves the opposite of a right-wing conclusion. I have no idea how any of what you said is even relevant, let alone leads you to a more conservative conclusion, because it states, quote, "The results of this population-based cohort study suggest that sexual minority veterans have a greater risk for suicide than the general US population and the general veteran population. Further research is needed to determine whether how suicide prevention efforts reach sexual minority veterans."
To data on adolescents, there's a 2020 paper that found that between 1995 and 2017, the trend in how the rate of suicide attempt was changing did not differ.
This is the MO of these Nazis. They just flash the title on screen and make up whatever they want. So how's this for a try? The conclusion of this one says, quote, "Although suicidal thoughts and behavior have generally declined among sexual minority and heterosexual youth, disparities in these incomes persist, and their prevalence among sexual minority youth has remained constantly elevated. Prioritized screening for risk for suicidal thoughts and behaviors in this vulnerable population is imperative to reduce disparities and prevalence of these outcomes. The only prescription here is to screen for indicators of these types of behaviors."
Between LGB and heterosexual adolescents, implying the gap between the two remained stagnant. Now we get somewhat conflicting findings from this 2020 paper, which looked at data from Delaware, Illinois, Massachusetts, Maine, North Dakota, and Rhode Island. What they found was that the trend in the gap of the suicide rate depended on how sexuality was being measured. So if you measured it in terms of identity, then what you would find is that the gap between heterosexual kids and LGB kids decreased from a factor of 5.2 in 2009 to 3.8 in 2017. On the other hand, if instead of asking kids about how they identify, you ask them about who they're actually having sex with, then we find that in 2009, non-hetero behaving kids were 2.6 times as likely as hetero behaving kids to have attempted suicide, and by 2017 this figure had increased to...
You've said literally nothing, and you've told people to ask kids who they have sex with. That's gross. Either way, the conclusion says the same thing as what a leftist perspective would align with, saying, quote, "The proportion of adolescents reporting sexual minority identity and same-sex sexual contacts increased between 2009 and 2017. Disparities in suicide attempts persist. Developing and implementing approaches to reducing sexual minority youth suicide is critically important."
to 3.3. Now that said, no matter how you measure it, neither of these changes were statistically significant, and so this paper doesn't provide very strong evidence either way. So looking at all the data as a whole that I've just gone through, I think it's fair to say that the evidence suggests that the gay-straight suicide gap has probably not narrowed over time, and the absolute rate of suicide among gay people has either remained the same or increased. Now, the suicide rate of homosexuals in gay-friendly areas also gives us reason to doubt that their mental states and problems are the result of discrimination. All the data suggests that, if anything, homosexuals in leftist nations and cities are at a relatively high risk of suicide, higher than is average for just gay people in general in the United States. Now, this may be surprising. You might say, well, with this time trend data and this kind of geographic data, bullying does have some effect. So why isn't this data reflecting that? I would just speculate here, and I would say that these findings can be reconciled if we say that, well, maybe the subcultures that gay people tend to establish in left-wing communities are even more damaging to mental health than is being bullied. And that's just one
unquote. That's just erroneous on so many levels. Here's every conclusion of the text wall he just put up, and I'm gonna let you decide where on the political spectrum these solutions fall on.
Speculation, but obviously, the data is what the data is, and so you do have to come up with some explanation that's going to reconcile the total set of facts. So regardless, on the basis of the various lines of evidence that I've reviewed in this video, it seems likely that discrimination either causally explains only a modest fraction of the straight LGB suicide gap, or close to none of it. Now, as is well known, non-heterosexualities have increased in popularity in recent years, and the fact that suicide rates for non-heterosexual people are remaining so high, even as we've created a world in which increasingly normal people identify as LGB, and T for that matter, and a culture which is generally accepting of homosexuality, is cause for, I think, substantial concern. It may be that abnormal sexualities, at least as they're currently being manifested in culture, cause deficits in mental health. And to the degree that that is plausible, we should view this change in sexuality that we're seeing in society, at least insofar as it's real and reflects actual changes in underlying sexuality, and not just more people coming out of the closet, so to speak. To the degree that it's real, it seems like a problem then. And looking at the data that I've presented here, I think that it's hard not to reflect on the fact that in the past we had a set of norms such that homosexuals were evidently no less happy than they are now, but their numbers were not rapidly gaining. And so, I'm naturally inclined towards a fairly liberal attitude about homosexuality, but the fact that their mental life is not improving while their numbers are rapidly gaining in a world where we've adopted as a culture an extremely left-wing set of values and norms pertaining to homosexuality, I think should make anyone a little bit more sympathetic towards a more right-wing approach to the issue. Anyway,
every single piece of evidence you've presented contradicts that idea. As I've manifestly demonstrated here, folks, literally all the evidence besides that which is blatantly fabricated nonsense off of blog posts contradicts every last prescription this guy makes. This guy is a eugenicist Nazi role-playing as a social scientist who, to people with room temperature Celsius IQs, looks like he knows what he's talking about, but in reality he's just another complete and total loser, probably from /poll, who cherry picks data points to imply that demographics should be eugenicized out of the population, despite the fact that not a single piece of research he brings up besides the fabricated line graph endorses that solution, and instead expressly endorses preventative and reaffirmative care. Don't fall for SSBS. Thanks for watching.